Welcome to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Shade Curry, and I believe every divorced woman deserves a romantic relationship where she feels safe, loved, and cherished. You can create the most amazing life after divorce, and I will teach you how. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Shadi Curry, and today we are talking about getting ghosted. Now, I know this might seem like a really itty bitty tiny thing that doesn't even really need to be addressed, but I work with women every week and I see the pain that gets caused by disappearing acts on dating apps all of the time. So I do want to address it because on the surface, you know, not to take it personally. If you got ghosted, that's his problem. All of those things, you know, all that logically. All of you do. You know, logically, you shouldn't make a big deal out of getting ghosted. And yet we do all of the time. And so I want to address the underlying challenges that come with being ghosted, because the ghosting itself is not the problem. The ghosting itself is, I don't want to say a normal part of dating because it is not normal, but the context of dating online or dating someone we met at a social event that we don't know very well, within that context, when you truly think about that context, that this was a perfect stranger that you barely knew, you can see where ghosting would come into play. Like when people don't have deep bonds or connections, they just don't take the connection very seriously. It's kind of like when you go to a networking event, which I love that as an analogy for dating. I often encourage my clients to treat dating like networking. You go to a networking event, there's, 50 to 70 people there. You work the room, you collect a bunch of business cards, you give a bunch of people your business card. And then you know what happens, right? Some people are going to just follow up with you that you don't want them to follow up with you, but they do, right? I remember I went to this networking event way back. What was so fascinating about the networking event is that two people followed up with me. One, I forget what he was selling, but he was like a hard sell, like right after the networking event. He called, emailed, texted, and I was like, dude, I literally don't want what you're selling. And even if I did, I'm probably not going to buy from you. But there was a woman there who sold life insurance and we connected. She followed up with me. We had coffee. She gave me kind of like some tips about business in the area. And then later she talked about life insurance and I was like, yeah, show me what you got. And then down the line, several weeks or even months later, I bought a policy from her. Isn't that interesting how that works? So networking is the perfect analogy for what is happening on the apps. Now, the gentleman who followed up with me very intensely, very ardently, I basically ghosted him. I basically did not, I didn't want it, so I didn't respond. Was I a terrible person for doing that? Maybe, I don't know, but I didn't know him and he didn't know me. And we're all adults here, so hopefully I'm not the only person who did not return his calls on his hard sells. But what I'm trying to say here is when you get ghosted, when you are waiting for that text to come back, you've sent a wonderful message, you matched with someone, the conversation's flowing, you're smiling at your phone, there's a spark of possibility, you send a thoughtful message and then nothing. Then days pass and then there's nothing, right? And then maybe by the 7th day, you're like, okay, he's gone forever. Then they come back up with like a little like, hey, how was your weekend? And not even addressing the fact that they didn't get back to you. That can be very confusing and very painful because now you're like, okay, but I really did like this person. What do I do now? And it can be very confusing, frustrating. You can start to take it personally, which is the worst thing to do. Right? Or start participating in the game. Like, okay, when he messages me, then I'm not going to message him for 3 days. And this behavior has almost become normal with dating apps. Again, it is kind of normal. It is kind of abnormal, right? I do want you to just see the bigger picture where people are not at that level of connection. There's just no stakes, there's no bond. And unfortunately for women who take being ghosted personally, what I have noticed is that in your mind, you have probably created a bond faster than you should have. Like texting a person for 2 days and then they don't respond after 2 days should not devastate you unless you're making it mean something about you, unless you have made more of that connection than was really there, right? Like that spark of possibility because you're having a good conversation has potentially turned into you filling in the gaps and building some castles in the air. Maybe you've attached your worth to it, and the fact that someone is paying you some attention is making you feel good. So you've attached your self-worth and your self-esteem and how you feel about yourself to whether or not a nice guy on an app is responding to you. This is not to excuse the behavior, but it is just to see what you contribute to the frustration, what you contribute to the pain, and where you can make a change in what you are thinking and feeling, even if the external behaviors don't change. Because some people are always going to ghost. Some people make a game of ghosting. Like there's all kinds of people out there. Like I always say, like you just don't know which one you're going to get on any given day. Now, why are you taking it so personally? Let's look at that. Again, it goes back to our socialization as women in patriarchal societies. Like we've been taught that we should be pursued. We should wait for our fairy tale. Like that if we're nice and beautiful and do all the right things, then a prince is going to come and choose us. And we've heard that message over and over and over and over and over for all of our lives. And when we weren't chosen, we got the opposite message. We got shame and judgment and opinions and unsolicited advice about the fact that we were not chosen in that moment. I mean, think back to when you were a teenager. I just remember so much drama over being chosen, over having a boyfriend or not having a boyfriend. Oh my God, there was so much. Like just the mental space that women, girls are taught to give to this is so devastating. Like we're literally draining ourselves of mental power, of brain power, not because we want to, but because that's what we're told when we're young and impressionable. We're told that this is the pursuit. And if you don't deal with that thinking, deep down in your subconscious, your brain is still operating based on that conditioning, that this is the pursuit. So every little bit of attention or validation from a man on an app is like, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe I finally am going to make it. Right? And then when someone doesn't respond to our messages, we leap to there's something wrong with me, because we've been told that unless we're chosen, there's something wrong with us. We said the wrong thing. We're not attractive enough. We're not interesting enough. Like, I want you to start to detach your personal worth and your personal accomplishment from the behavior of men that you meet when you are dating, because the two have nothing to do with each other. Now, of course, there's growth for everybody. You can always grow. You can always put out more of your authentic self. You can always be more expressive and more interesting. Like all of those things are things that I work with my clients on. However, even if you did everything perfectly, you were perfectly interesting, perfectly authentic, perfectly bold and brilliant, there will still be people who ghost you. Like it's just part of it. So you cannot hinge your growth. You cannot validate your growth only when every random guy on an app says, oh yes, I'm interested in you and I'm going to choose you. Now, for some of you, you're not necessarily taking it personally, but that behavior, the ghosting, is triggering things that happened in your prior marriage, right? Like if someone doesn't respond to you, it triggers feelings of being ignored and dismissed by your ex. It triggers feelings of feeling invisible. It can trigger loneliness, and it can trigger just that despair of, being treated a certain way. And that's something that you have to take care of. It is similar to your value being attached to their behavior, but this one comes more from your past experiences where you internalized messages about yourself based on your ex's behavior. So it's the same thing. Like we take the behavior, the things that men are doing, and we use it we translate it into meaning about ourselves and who we are and our identity. And that's a problem, because you cannot create joy and happiness and vibrancy and feeling alive if your self-esteem is in the hands of random men, or if your self-esteem is in the hands of your ex, or anyone for that matter, actually, even in other contexts. If your self-esteem is in the hands of your boss or your friends or your parents or your children, that is a recipe for running on a treadmill of people-pleasing and despair and self-abandonment your whole life. So that is something that you definitely want to take care of. Like, hey, can I be okay no matter what other people do? Can I have unconditional self-love, unconditional care and respect for myself no matter what other people do? And let other people's actions be their responsibility, and let them put the sort of like the shame of that behavior on them and not on yourself. Like women, we're just, because we get blamed for everything, not just in relationships, but in society in general. The narrative for hundreds and hundreds of years is that if there's a problem, it's the woman's fault. Even if it's a man that is doing the thing, it's got to be because some woman somewhere, his mother, his wife, whatever, didn't do her job. So there is that message in the air, part of the air that we breathe, that women are to blame. And we've internalized that. So when things happen, many women will turn that on themselves to say, oh, I wonder what I did wrong. Even if you can't, even if you think, well, I didn't do anything wrong. Deep down, you're searching for what you did wrong. There's an assumption that you might have done something wrong. I talk to women who are second guessing themselves all the time. Like, it's clear that the guy is wrong. He is in the wrong. But then they go home and then they wonder if somehow they triggered it or they brought it on themselves. And that is work that needs to be done. That is work that needs to shift. If you're ever going to be in a relationship where you are treated well, you have to shift taking on other people's responsibilities out of guilt, obligation, and fear. That you have got to shift that. So if that's something you would like help with, I want to encourage you to reach out to me. You can book a consultation call with the link in the show notes, and we can talk about shifting that. But in the meantime, if you find yourself getting triggered or sad or disappointed or in despair because someone you barely knew ghosted you, let's talk about a different way to start to think about that. The first thing I want you to do is ask, what was actually happening here? Was this actually a relationship? Now, if you are in a relationship with someone, like you guys have been dating, you've been talking, you've met each other's friends, like things are happening and that person disappears off the face of the earth. Okay, listen, you have every right to be like, this is bad, and feel sad and grieve. 100%. But if you were texting on an app with a person for 2 days and they stop responding, I want you to ask yourself, what was really happening here? What was the nature of this relationship in reality, not in my head? And start to become aware of how your brain makes leaps based on one or two interesting conversations. And when you have that awareness, you'll start to see where you are building castles in the air, where you are becoming overly attached too quickly. And a lot of times people say, oh, I just get attached too quickly, as if that's something that happens to them. That's not something that happens to you. That is something that your brain is actively doing, and you can take control of that. You are thinking thoughts that attach you to the person versus thinking thoughts that put you in a more grounded, deliberate, intentional space in your mind. It is a mindset issue. If you're getting attached too quickly, it is a mindset issue. Now, there might be some trauma responses in there, but you know, the key in that moment is the thoughts you're thinking about that person. You're thinking thoughts that make it seem like you have a relationship when you don't have a relationship yet, and you want to address those thoughts. You want to intentionally choose thoughts that you're going to think about people at every stage of meeting them. This is what we do with relationship gates. So with some of my clients, we say, okay, how long is a person a stranger to you? And during whatever time they determine, so whether it's 2 weeks or a month or 6 weeks or whatever, the thought that they will be thinking is that this person is a stranger. I do want them to become something more, but right now this is a stranger. If the person is a stranger and then they drop off the face of the earth, you might be disappointed because, you're like, oh, this person seemed really interesting, but you won't be devastated. You won't be annoyed. You won't go venting to everyone who's willing to pause long enough to hear you vent about another guy ghosting you, which is just a drain on your energy. You'll be able to move forward and be like, okay, on to the next. This happens. This happens to everyone on the apps. It happens to men and women, which is what's fascinating, because when you personalize it, you think it's only happening to you, or that somehow the universe has created this way of dating that is a personal attack on your ability to find a relationship. It's not. It's just the nature of things. It's like in spring, there's going to be rain showers. We don't always like rain showers because sometimes there's mud and, sometimes our clothes get wet when we're on our way to a party. But that's just the nature of spring in certain places, right? So think of ghosting as just part of the landscape with dating, and that if that situation is causing you to have really low dips in your emotional state, that is a mindset situation that you need to work with. That is something that you need to slow down, become aware of what you're thinking that is fueling that level of devastation. Okay, so you want the focus to be on how you are responding to being ghosted. Now, this is not to say that when a person ghosts you, you need to make excuses for them. I do not believe in that. I always have my clients determine sort of like a reasonable pace in conversation that they want to have. So, okay, if a person doesn't respond to you in 2 days, 3 days, what is the time frame in which you are going to move on? It's different for different people, and it can be different depending on the level of conversation people have had. But I do believe in being intentional and making your own CEO decisions about that. If a person ghosts me and maybe they come back and they apologize for not responding, okay, maybe I'll give them another chance. But if they just pop back up expecting to pick up, maybe I won't. I don't like to give formulas because it's not going to work in every situation. So forgive me for not being more specific about what to do. But when you do that mindset work and you're in that grounded situation, you'll know, because you've set your own philosophy and your own principles and your own values, and you'll be able to have nuance about how you respond without it becoming like this huge drama. And then if this is someone that you've been dating 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and something like that happens, you take a different lens to it, right? It could be, okay, something's going on here. Usually, and this is as a general rule, typically the way it goes is, I've had clients where the guy dropped off for like 24 hours when he was with his family, or, things like that. It didn't mean that he wasn't interested in a relationship with her, but it did mean that this is how he shows up in that kind of situation. So if you aren't exclusive with someone or you've been dating them casually for quite a while, the way you look at it isn't so much, this is bad or this is terrible or they're doing this to me. It's more, is this a pattern? And what does this pattern mean? And how do I feel about the pattern? Right? So it's a little more nuanced about what it could mean. It could mean, oh, when this person is with their family, they shut the whole world out. Or when this person goes on trips, they see other women anything could be happening. And that's why there's no general rule. You have to say, okay, I'm in this relationship. This is happening. Not my favorite thing to happen. I need to dig a little bit deeper to see what's going on. I need to see what the pattern looks like. And then I need to make a decision about what that pattern means for me. Again, the decision is still yours. Even if the person has a great reason for dropping off the face of the earth, you can just decide that that's just not something you want. Like, I want someone who is as clingy and needy. I put that in quotes because, I don't know that there's really such a thing as me. I want someone who is my cuddle bug and who wants to call me every single day. And that is entirely your choice. You have to know yourself and what constitutes a nourishing relationship for you. You have to know your core values, and you have to choose someone who matches that. A lot of people will talk about, you need to ask for what you want. And I always just want to be a little bit careful with that, because it implies that you have someone who has a pattern, and then you're going to ask them to change that pattern, and then they're going to change that pattern, and then you're going to live happily ever after. And that's not usually how it happens. What usually happens is people have a pattern. You might ask for what you want, and maybe they're willing to change the pattern, but typically the changes won't stick. Typically. There are always exceptions to the rule. So I always advise my clients not to have expectations that a pattern is going to change, and to more so observe the pattern thoroughly, get a good idea of what the pattern is and the person's communication style, and then make a personal decision about what's right for them. Not making excuses like, oh, what if they're just busy? Maybe they're not a good texter. Okay, maybe they're not a good texter. Do you want someone who's not a good texter? Is that what is nourishing for you? You don't want to settle for something that's less than what you want because you think there's no one better out there. Just repeating the cycle of being in a relationship that isn't what you want. You want to be clear about what's happening in reality, not in your, not making up stories in your mind. You want to know what's right for you through your core values, and you want to be willing to take a decision about what's right for you. Because when you move people who are not right for you out of the way, you make space for the ones who are right for you. It's so important to not get caught up in a cycle of like mental gymnastics over someone that's just not turning out to be right, because all of that time and energy is keeping you from the person who's actually right for you. All right. Those are my thoughts on getting ghosted. It is kind of sort of a not so great normal part of modern dating, especially online dating, but it also happens with in-person dating. And so we want to get to a neutral place about that. Just see it as like, it's like the weather, and then checking on your own emotions about it. What are the things that you're doing to make it into really dramatic, painful situation? We want to work on that mindset. And then finally, you want to define what works for you and put yourself in a place where you are able to make decisions that are right for you when you get ghosted, because it's going to happen, but it doesn't have to be the end of the world. All right. Thanks for your time and attention today, and I will see you next time. Thanks for listening today. If you are ready to get married after divorce, I want to invite you to download my free 8-video training specifically designed to help divorced women date with ease and get married again. Head over to SadeCurry.com to get started. That's SadeCurry.com. I'll see you inside.